everyone. I am Hassel Aviles, and you are listening to We Have Lived by Not 9 to 5. This will include the highs, the lows, and everything in between. We may talk about some difficult topics. We may cover mental health and substance use challenges. We want to have a real open dialogue about what it's like to work in the hospitality industry. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I'm Hassel Aviles, and you're listening to We Have Lived by Not 9 to 5. Our intention with this podcast series is to learn from each other. I'm here to tell you about experiences I have lived. I want to hear stories of experiences you have lived. And this podcast is here to share experiences that we have lived. And today I'm so excited to have two guests that I'm going to let you introduce yourselves, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So for anyone that listening that doesn't know me or Not 9 to 5, I'm the co-founder and executive director of Not 9 to 5. Not 9 to 5 is a nonprofit global leader in mental health advocacy and education. We have been doing this for a couple years now. This is our first audio version of our brand and our experience, and we're so lucky to be able to do this podcast through partnerships with the Terms of Service Network. Shout out to Terms of Service. If you have never listened to that podcast, please do immediately. So yeah, Thomas and Andrew, please introduce yourselves.
Awesome. Well, first and foremost, thank you for having us. My name is Thomas. I'm the general manager and partner at PERILLA Korean American Fare. And I work alongside Andy in the restaurant.
My name is Andrew, or Andy. I'm the executive chef and partner at PERILLA Korean American Fare.
We also we used to host, and we still are hosting a podcast, but the previous podcast was formerly Kimchi Kids Podcast. So
We're going to get into that.
yes.
Formerly, currently, I have so many questions.
Yeah. Well, we're excited to both be here, and thank you for having us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So for anyone also that doesn't know, I'm from Toronto, but we're shooting this currently in Chicago.
Yes.
Which means I get amazing Chicago guests. And also we may hear the Chicago train. That might be a thing. I'm owning it. I love it. It's in the background.
Yeah.
From being from another urban city, I think we need to embrace these aspects.
Yeah.
We're not
absolutely.
in a studio right now.
Part of who we are.
It's who we are. I mean, we built our own studio, but it's still in downtown Chicago. So we're gonna, if you hear the train,
It's literally right there.
it's because it's literally behind us. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we're going to get into it. I like to start with a bit of an icebreaker before we get into more deeper stuff. Can you tell us each a hospitality story, and ideally of your own lived experience? So not like some story you've heard from your friend, but something you have lived, through. And it can be either funny, favorite, or fucked up. Your choice.
You want to go ahead?
God, yeah, sure.
I know you got good stories.
So the one that comes to mind for me is it was like the first year I was cooking, and I'm just learning the basics, building my foundation. A lot of sweeping and mopping,
That's so real.
yeah, doing the bitch work, I guess. But like doing everything everyone else didn't want to do, right? I was a new guy on the team, but within the first year, we get news that the god of the culinary world, Thomas Keller at the time from the French Laundry, would be coming to Chicago for a book signing, and he would be doing it at our restaurant, the Bristol, with Chef Chris Pendel. And I remember just the amount of work it took to prepare for that menu, and then going into the menu. I mean, we were doing 14 to 16-hour days, and at that time, we were on shift pay, so
Yeah.
we're not making, the money that we all thought. Whatever. Anyways, So the day of, my whole focus is like I was responsible for like 2 items, and it was a 5-man line, but that night we had like 18 people there because they all just wanted to see Thomas Keller and meet him.
Right.
So my focus was to just make these corn fritters that he had in his French Laundry book.
Wow.
And it was like, mid-service, and I was so focused because the whole day was like, hey, Lim, don't fuck this up.
So much pressure.
Yeah, Thomas Keller's gonna eat those, So I'm like, okay, so that's all. I'm
No
literally
pressure.
just
Yeah, I
like,
was gonna
look, I'm not even blinking, getting fryer oil in my eyeballs, and
Oh my gosh.
there's some commotion behind me, and I'm just like, I'm not even gonna look, And then later on at the night, I'm like, hey, are we gonna get to meet Thomas Keller? And they're like, are you serious? Like, he was in the kitchen, and during the commotion, I'm like, was he? Like, no one turned me around and said Thomas Keller's right here shaking everyone's hands, and like,
Except for you.
except for me. So end of the night, I'm like being a little, just complaining, but his PR person comes back and is just like thanking us and all this stuff, and he's just like, did you guys, was it cool to meet him and all this stuff? And I'm like, I mean, I didn't get to see him, but it was cool it was cool to cook for him, and we've been here since 7 a.m. This was like 12, it was like after midnight at this time.
Jeez.
I'm like, we've been here since 7 a.m. But yeah, I guess it was cool, And she's like, you didn't get to meet him? I'm like, no, it sucked, Like, I just wanted to see the man, And
That's a lot of hype.
Right.
Right.
And I was just disappointed.
Yeah.
But so I guess the main part of the story is the fact that the next morning, me and my sous chef are in there early prepping, and we're just talking shit. And we're just like, man, this guy just left. Yeah. He knocks on the back door. We open it, and it's Thomas Keller.
Oh, wow.
By
Jeez.
himself. And
You got an exclusive.
and
There you go.
he's talking to us, and he's just like, I'm so sorry. I had a crazy migraine last night, so I had to leave. I'm like, you don't have to explain shit to me.
But really cool that he did.
And then he gets all the menus from that evening, and he's like, tell me everyone's name that was here. And he personally hand signed every single menu with every single person's name. And
that.
yeah, and I still have it framed up on my wall today. And it was just like so cool to see someone
Yeah.
who I saw at such a high level bring himself down and be like, no, I understand what this is. He's like, and how humble he was about it. And it was never like, hey, I'm gracing you with my presence. It was more like, thank you so much for the work that you did. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is chef, right? This is like the
Leadership.
exemplary. Yeah, exactly. And it was, that's my that's my story.
That's an epic
pretty
hospitality
cool.
story. Thank you so much for sharing that.
I was trying to think about this on my way here, and for me, I think it's really the moment. I've been like studying this, this craft for so long, and been a big student of wine, which was a big focus of a long part of my career. And I think for me, like the thing that's really stands out in the last few years is just the opportunity that was given to me to come out and help work a harvest that I did in California. And at the time, it's kind of unheard of that the winery is called Pei Vineyards. It's in the Sonoma Coast. Incredible team, incredible wine, and at the time, it's like I just thought, well, why not? Like, why not give it a try? Without realizing at the time how difficult it was to get a seat on that harvest team. It's incredibly sought after by some of the best sommeliers in the entire country. And I just remember I wasn't even certified at the time. I was just starting my practice. I think I took my level 1 introductory exam, and during the process of studying for this level 2 exam, I remember I'm like, I'm just going to shoot them an email right now. It was like 12 months out, like no joke. And I shot, Nick and Andy an email. And of course, like as expected, nothing came back. And again, just a month later, just shot an email again. Hey, still very interested. And then I remember the day that he finally wrote back was kind of like I'm sure this was like his, 600th email from some Som out there. And he's just like, hey, appreciate the letter, keep in touch, it's still a ways out and we don't know the dates. And for me, just like receiving that back was just like everything. And I just remember I'm like, I'm going to pester this guy as much as I can until this thing actually happens. And just for months, like every month I would just shoot him an email. And, you know, one of those just weird circumstances where he finally emailed me back, and, you know, 2 weeks out, I was just like, I'm there. I'm going to fly out. I'm like, don't worry about my accommodations. And I just went and joined the team. And, you know, sitting there and being a part of, you know, as a student of wine, you're always kind of like glamorizing and romanticizing what it's actually like to make this stuff. And it was such a humbling, gratifying experience to like go there and be like, wow, this is backbreaking work. This is an incredible labor of love. And I remember it was like probably my third or fourth day, we're on the crush pad, which is where you're like just hand picking grapes all day. You're just getting baked by the sun. And is, you know, all the while, at least they're pouring like incredible wine and everyone's drinking really nice juice while working. But like I'm there with like some incredible talents, right? And one of them, Wendy, was advanced sommelier, studying to become a master, and it kind of worked around the table, and it got to me, and they're like, "So when did you pass your certified?" And I'm like, "I'm not even certified here." And then like the way it was just like crickets. They're just like, and then Nick just like, "How the fuck did you get into this fucking harvest team?" And you know, like,
because I'm cute.
But, you know, at the end of the week, I got up on my last night. It's such an incredible experience for anyone that's, you know, a student of wine. I would highly recommend, you know, doing the experience, because it's not like anything you can ever imagine. Incredibly hard, but such an intimate process when you're with a small winery like that. We're eating dinner with the family and the kids every night. And I just giving that little speech of thank you for having me, and just to feel that reciprocated back. And they were just like, you were incredible, and you busted your ass, and we, you know, couldn't have gotten this through without you. And just to like feel that was a pretty amazing experience. And, you know, like Andy, that was for me, that was like a really cool person to like be able to just like be, you know, in the same room with, and to see them work and, you know, let them, you know, invite me into their doors was such an amazing experience overall.
Wow, you both came with good stories. I loved that story. I have been part of winery harvest before. I'm not a sommelier. I've not studied, but I had the privilege of just being invited to, you know, be part of that. And it is very extremely hard work. Shout out to, you know, migrant workers and so many people that don't get don't get the credit or pay or usually get to even drink the product.
Right, exactly.
That are doing the work. And I think
while you're working,
while you're working, it really makes you respect it.
Yeah.
In a different way though, right?
Oh, 100%. I mean, after that experience, I remember like looking at every bottle of wine and just being like every drop counts here. Like every little berry that was picked, you know, was cared for so much. And just a deep appreciation and respect for the hard work and the amount of hands that goes into it. It's so many.
Isn't it unbelievable?
Yeah, absolutely.
I am a huge nerd when it comes to that stuff. Like I find it so fascinating. It's just the research and learning.
Yeah.
And then like you said, when you're there and you're invited into someone's home, because a lot of people that own wineries, you're right, live there too. Maybe not the whole year, but part of the year. In Toronto, about 3 hours away, is a little region called Prince Edward County.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful. And there's a bunch of really delicious wineries. Shout out to Prince Edward County wine. and being able to have those kinds of experiences and trips really does change your appreciation.
Yeah, absolutely.
For the product.
No, sure.
Okay, so we're going to dive into some questions and some conversation discussion about change in the industry. So I like to speak a lot about some of the complicated aspects of the industry, not because I want to dwell on hard things, but more because I think that when we can put language to experiences, we can learn from them. When we can learn to name something, we can learn to manage it. And I think for too long in our industry, we've been very silent on a lot of things and normalized certain, toxic aspects of the industry or abusive aspects of the industry, or even glamorized some of that stuff, unfortunately. But I will say in the last couple of years, I feel like there's been various significant changes in the hospitality industry. as a result of the pandemic. And also it was a long time coming.
Right.
I always say
sure.
the rates of high mental health challenges and substance use challenges were far, like, very much prominent before the pandemic.
Oh, absolutely.
But I feel like the pandemic really turned the heat up.
Yeah,
You know, it was
brought it
like,
to light.
yeah, exactly. Like, really have made it more of a mainstream conversation. And even outside of mental health and substance use, there's so many other aspects in the workplace and industry wide. I'm curious, which changes stand out the most to each of you?
One thing that I definitely want to touch on is something that we're, even like myself and Andy, are really trying to keep in mind, which is, I think it used to be such a heavy drinking kind of mindset in the industry, and even as something as like when you go to another restaurant or like your friend's restaurant, like you always usually walked in with like a big old case of beer, and it was always like the message was like, hey, here's for the guys, like here's for everybody after a hard night, like go get wasted, or here's something to take the edge off of it. But like even for us, like sales contest awards, like even the idea of like, oh, you get a bottle of wine, or like you get a drink, or like all that. Like I think the idea of being comfortable not drinking in the industry is definitely something I'm seeing way more. It's way more prevalent now. And I feel like part of like, as owners of this restaurant, like we want to also like, encourage that as well. So I know it comes up quite a bit more these days where, me and Andy will be like, well, let's do something, and then let's reward them with like some food, or, maybe like it's like an experience somewhere, right? But like the idea, and even like going to another restaurant, like, we would, went and I had, I asked Andy to grab some snacks for like the Daisy's crew here in Logan Square, like
Nice.
And I'm seeing that more and more. Like I just saw on Instagram the other day, like a chef came by Elche, and it was the sous chef for Mitokaya and Teheria, Diana's sous chef, and she brought she like brought the whole Elche team like a giant like Taco Bell, like what do you call those, like the massive boxes?
Yeah, it's like a Taco Bell crave case or something.
Something like that. And I'm just like, fuck yeah, like that's so cool to see that like that's happening across the industry, and it's not like, hey, here's a big old bottle of whiskey to go get lit after work, and it's like, here's some food because I fucking love you and care about you, and like want your bellies full. And it's like what we do in the business already is like feeding people because we want them to experience that. It's like love, through food. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah,
I love what you're saying. It's almost like we're learning different ways to show our love, our appreciation.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always have to be centered around substances.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I think something that I've seen change a lot is definitely like the culture of restaurants, the toxic nature of things. You hear these, like you said, a lot of times they're like glorified, right? These like horror stories of, oh, I had a chef throw a plate at my head and it broke on the wall behind me, or like, and for the better, like these things are not allowed, anymore because of social media and things like that. And, but those things were real, and we come from that environment. And, like we mentioned earlier, it's like, it was silenced. It was behind the scenes. And so, and I think a lot of it stemmed from, mental health issues that we were not addressing or even aware of a lot of the times. And I think through the pandemic, which was great for some people apparently, but through the pandemic, we were able to see how much damage was done in this industry, or was being done in this industry. And I think I can't say that being part of it, like growing up in it, like we're definitely guilty as well. And we still catch ourselves trying to make adjustments to old habits and old ways of thinking. And I think at least personally for Perilla, we've really made it a point to try and understand that we're old school, you know. We may not look it, but we're old school, and it's been an adjustment period for us, and I appreciate it. I love it, and you know, there are times that Thomas will be like, hey, maybe, you know, chill the fuck out. You know how you know, have to handle certain things, and vice versa, right? And it's like we're human beings, we're imperfect, and yeah, the goal is just to kind of embrace the change and try to be better.
I really appreciate how honest that answer was, because it's true.
Yeah.
We are, especially if we've been like, I was born and raised in the industry, not born and raised. I was born and raised in Toronto. I grew up in the industry.
Right. Yeah.
My first job, you know, I was 17 years old. I'm 42 now.
Yeah.
That's a long time. And I've been in and around restaurants that entire time, you know, even owning part of one at one point. And so you're right. We have to do a lot of unlearning.
Right.
And that's not just going to be a switch,
Yeah.
right? We can't just all of a sudden not have certain anger show up
Right.
and not be able to express that when that's what we've been doing for decades.
Yeah.
Right.
That's not how human behavior works. And I mean, it'd be kind of nice if that
No,
was
for
the
sure.
case. So you can just flip a switch.
Just want to be perfect today, you
You
know.
know, but it's not real. And so I think for me, I definitely have had my own experiences of that where I'm like, yeah, I'm not so proud of how I reacted to that.
Yeah.
You know, or I'm
Yeah.
not so proud of how maybe I handled that situation. And you're right, it still can happen to us. And I think part of it is what you're saying is owning it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
for sure.
It's like maybe, I kind of lost my shit that day, or, you know, and like it happens. I think it happens to more of us, and we get ashamed, and that doesn't help.
Yeah, I don't think it's about like being ashamed or I don't know. It's about addressing it and you know, acknowledging it.
Yes.
You know, having the self-awareness, you know, to say, hey, like I need to reflect on my behavior and I need to make changes, you know, and we're again like and you know, this actually bleeds into my personal life, because I feel like
How so?
just you know, your adrenaline is just pumping,
Oh,
you know,
right.
and then when you get home, it's still like high intensity, and you know, like you have a conversation with a loved one and you're just like, what the fuck are you talking? And it's just like, dude, that's not the environment you're in right now, you know? So, you know, I just learning to turn that off, you know, and then also we have this thing where we try to be positive and have high energy at work all the time, you know, which is very difficult and it's exhausting.
Definitely.
Especially like, I don't want to say especially for me, but I'm, you know, I would say I'm more introverted than Tom, and because of that, like it is very exhausting for me to just like show up, you know, and be who I am at work. And you know, I heard this quote a long time ago where it was like she was giving a commencement speech to somebody, and she was talking about her father and how same thing at work. He was like a politician or something like that. So he was like this incredible human being, and everyone loved him. He was all smiles, but when he got home, he was kind of an asshole, and he was
So
let his
common.
stress out, right?
I've heard this before.
And she would say like, the world got the best of you, your family got the rest of you, you know? And that struck home with me, because like I find myself doing that, you know? And I think like over the last few years, it's really, I've tried to purposefully acknowledge and be aware of my behavior, you know, outside of just wherever I am, you know.
And maybe even checking in with what you need to decompress.
Right.
Before you even
Yes.
walk in the door, right?
Absolutely.
Because I've noticed that sometimes, so I'm a parent. I have two kids. Well, they're not kids now; they're teenagers, which is so shocking to me. Still, I'm still in denial about it. But I sometimes have to do certain things for myself before I walk through that door,
I love that. Yeah.
because I know I'm going to show up differently. I know I'm going to be different with them, you know. And if I don't do that, I'm most likely to get annoyed more faster,
Right.
or, you know, and everyone has different things that work for them.
Yeah.
So it's
Right.
not even about like, go work out or
No.
go meditate. Like
Yeah.
we all have to figure out what works for us as individuals. But I think,
Weed helps.
right? Like everyone's different.
Right.
Cannabis,
Right.
like who
Right.
knows? Everyone's different. But I've noticed that it makes a huge difference if I'm better emotionally and mentally prepared, if I've slept well, right?
Right.
Like all these different things. I know they seem really basic and
You're
cliche,
not overworked.
but not
Yeah.
overworked. You know, if have
Stressed
I
out,
eaten
yeah.
that day?
Yeah.
What did I eat that day? You know, all these things really make a huge difference
Yeah.
in how we show up for each other.
100%. 100%.
Okay, so I want to get, you know, we've talked about some difficult and challenging aspects of the industry, but I'm curious in learning a little bit more about, you know, it'd be so easy for us to just sometimes leave this industry behind. Be like, and sometimes we dream about it, right? Like I think we have moments of like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Why am I still here? You know, but there is such a deep love, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm curious what specifically about this industry still gives you hope and keeps you in it.
So that's kind of tough for me. There's so much. I'm incredibly passionate about the work that we do. Not only on just like the level of like, we open our doors, we serve food, we get to engage with people's lives, we get to like turn somebody's week around, we get to take somebody that's going through a pretty rough month, rough year, you know, rough day, and we get to like transport them away from all of that for a moment. And for the 2.5 hours that they're in our restaurant, we get to like, you know, take them into this world that they've never been in. But even more so than that, I think on a bigger, grander level, you know, Andy and I have been talking about this Korean restaurant in downtown Chicago. And I think that there's such a big part of what we're doing now and representing our culture, you know, generational recipes that we've had in our families, you know, rediscovering who we are as Korean Americans, where we're kind of like not exactly Korean enough, not exactly American enough, don't feel at home in Korea, don't feel accepted sometimes here in this country.
I feel that.
And being like floating through this space our whole lives. I think that for me personally, being able to put who I am, you know, front and center in downtown Chicago, and being able to educate people about our culture and introduce our, you know, new flavors to people that have never experienced this before. It's every single day is rewarding for me on that level. And anytime that our restaurant connects with, whether it's someone that maybe visited Korea once and then is like super excited to see our restaurant, or maybe they were Korean and they were adopted and felt like this disconnect from their culture, and they come and see what we're doing and like they just get to fully immerse themselves into who they are. All of those things, like there's just so many different stories now we've experienced through the almost 4 years. And it's just, I feel like it's just never ending. I feel like I get to meet more and more people. The restaurant gets to connect with more and more people. So yeah, it's a lot. It's really incredible for me. So
That was a beautiful answer. I really appreciated that. I also really relate to the I don't belong here, I don't belong there point that you made.
Right.
My parents are Chilean, but I was born in Canada.
Yeah.
And I've gone to Chile back many times, but in Canada, I'm a woman of color and I'm
Right.
not like everyone else. In
Right.
Chile, I'm a Canadian who looks like them but doesn't speak like them. Even
Right.
though I'm fluent in Spanish, they can tell.
Right.
And it's like you never find that full sense of belonging.
Yeah.
It's something that's really complicated. Even for my parents as immigrants,
Yeah.
you know, that left Chile, they still feel that way.
Yeah.
They go back there and they're like, we're from here, but
Yeah.
we're not.
Right.
And then we're Canadian, but we're not.
Yeah.
It's very real. I really appreciate you sharing that.
One of our cooks, Brent, shared a video with me recently, and it's about I don't even know how 4 or 5 generations of this Chinese family that lived in Texas along what river is in the main one? Is it the Mississippi? No, it's not. That's in Mississippi. But it's the main river. But basically, they're saying that they set up their homes just along the river, right? And they set up businesses along that river. And for generations, they were serving early 1900s, right? They had their own little grocery stores. They had their own little whatever, and they were serving people of color only, right? These grocery stores were for coloreds only, and it was obviously because they weren't allowed to go to the whites only places, right? So this like relationship between Asians and Black people have been, part of American fabric for a long time. All the way up to, the 92 riots in LA. But these families were saying, ultimately, it's like, we've been here for so long. Yeah. And they have an accent. And not a Chinese one. It's a Texas accent, right?
Right.
And it's like, at what point are we going to be part of this American fabric, right? At what point are we going to be accepted? Because they would go into stores and then they would ask for something like, "Oh my gosh, your English is so good," and it's like, "Bitch, I've been here for fucking generations," And
check yourself.
But it's the same thing, right? It's like society has created this image of American, and it's like if you're not white, then it's like, "Oh, where are you from?" And it's like, "I'm from fucking Chicago, man. I was born and raised," So, and can you and they're like, "Wow, look, you're I don't hear an accent at all," It's like, yeah,
What part of born and raised didn't land?
Right.
I had somebody tell me that was like, "Oh," they're like, "What's your name?" And I was like, "It's Thomas." And he's like, "No, but what's your real name?" I was just like,
Tomas.
Thomas. I don't know what to tell you. I was like, I knew what he was poking at, but
no, but it's a problem, and I think it's a problem that shows up in so many different aspects of our culture and society all over North America. I'm from Toronto. I've experienced the same things you're talking about here in Chicago.
Yeah. I think it's just worldwide. It's not just an American thing,
Also, especially in countries where colonialism took over.
Right.
Absolutely.
We're colonized lands. These lands are not ours.
Right.
And, the systems of oppression are very much alive.
Yeah.
White supremacy culture is very much what we are all living in. I heard this quote once and it stuck with me by Wante, and it says, "White supremacy is not a shark. White supremacy is the water."
Wow.
And it's the water we're all swimming in. It's the water we all live in. And so to not pretend like it affects all of us, because even if you are someone with the most power and privilege, it still affects you.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not like it seems like they're benefiting, but if you're white, this still takes you down in different ways.
100%. 100%.
Okay, so going back to hospitality, the love and the hope.
Good
just
stuff,
give us.
yeah.
I'm just curious, what keeps you still so committed?
A lot of the same things. I think why we work so well together is the fact that we have very similar long-term goals, and community is something that's been so important to us. Just being in the industry, and then having our own restaurant. And then seeing the community grow, and then like yesterday, we had someone interested in the job, and he was this Korean American guy, and it was so cool to just have someone interested because it vibed with who he was, right? And that's kind of like what we set out to do, was like create a home where people who look like us can feel like they belong or feel comfortable in this new environment. And for us to now be at a point where it's like, that's the spot, right? Like if you want culture, and it's not Korean culture, right? It's Korean American culture, because like Tom and I have not spent time in Korea, we very briefly in our lives, but for decades more, we've been here in this country, and we're Korean at home with our parents, but outside all the other times in our lives, we are very much American. So like was confused. Like, how do we embrace that? How do we represent that? So I think the journey for us in the last 4 years was kind of discovering that, and we're still figuring it out. But that's kind of what motivates me to want to continue this this journey. It's like this never-ending evolution of not just us, but like the community that we're building, and people who want to be a part of it. Even like doing this, we had this podcast.
We're going to talk about this. Is a perfect segue.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. Let's get into the podcast.
But I'm just just through that we were able to meet so many incredible people,
Yes.
and then continue to build that community. But it all came from this love for food, and ultimately, that's what it's about. It's like, let's build this community, and then let's cook some delicious food and eat together.
And that is community.
Yeah.
Like, that is a community care in action, in practice.
Absolutely.
So perfect segue. Thank you for that podcast segue. I was literally going there next. Let's talk about the Kimchi Kids podcast. I'm going to let you lead this conversation, and then if I have some questions, I'll ask.
So I think like it kind of comes back to what Andy was just talking about, and during one of these little questions, sit down and question and answer formats, Andy was asked about like what all this means for him, and there's this quote that I'm gonna like hack, but Andy said something along the lines of like, food is like a catalyst for bringing people together to the table. And I think like our whole lives have been around the dinner table, right? Whether Andy's in the kitchen and I'm in the front, but this idea of like the hospitality industry, it's like bringing people together. And I felt like the podcast was exactly that, right? It was like through our experiences of working in the industry, we got to open doors and invite people to sit down and share a little bit about who they were, give them a soapbox and platform to share, what that restaurant, what that menu, what that experience, that what that journey through their career was like. Which one of the biggest reasons was that like we felt like, sometimes journalists are looking for a story within the story. They're like looking to share something that they are on an agenda that they're trying to push. And I felt like for the longest time, sometimes maybe it's like a chef talking about his restaurant kind of got twisted, and like we wanted to like explore the idea of like, what if we let them just share exactly what it is that they wanted to share about why they're doing what they're doing, how they got there, challenges they faced, things that they're learning on the way, so that we can inspire the next generation. And through that, it was an incredible, we had 2 seasons fully wrapped up. We had episodes for season 3 already taped and recorded. And it's just unfortunate. There was a team of 5 of us, and 2 of them just didn't have the same values aligned with what the rest of us wanted, which was really the idea of community, sharing, putting a spotlight on people, and letting them speak and share their stories. But unfortunately, because of those 2 members, all of the assets that we've had on the show have basically been removed. And so we can no longer either use the name, share any of the content that was recorded. And it was a really difficult learning experience for us. But, again, like I think the mission being what we set out to do in the first place, which was to really make this about the people that are on the show. We as the 4, there's 4 of us remaining now. I guess it was a team of 6, and so we're going to revamp. And we still want to do what we wanted to do, and I think by not doing it, I almost feel like we kind of give in to, and we like, and it just sucks. The whole situation just kind of sucks, because at the end of the day, it's like, regardless of like who was right or who was wrong in this disagreement, at the end of the day, it's like someone's story was taken down and removed, And that really sucks. It's like, I think it's not about who we are. And so if there was anything we could do, believe me, we would do it. But unfortunately, I think the situation is just like, let's just move on. Let's learn from this. Let's, and keep moving the agenda forward, which is, what we're excited to do. So, we're in the process. It's actually called In Process.
I love that.
And it's kind of this time around, we're super excited because, the whole Kimchi Kid started because it was started with 3 of us originally. And so Andy and I were the hosts of the show. But I think with this new format, we have incredible teammates on the new show. And we want them to be involved. So it's no longer like host Thomas and Andy, but instead it's like now we get to be like a team. And like sometimes when we have a guest on that, let's say like someone like Angeline or Mary, who's on our show now, if they connect with that person on a deep personal level, like it makes complete sense that like maybe I sit out on that show, right? Like I don't have to be there, can still be a part of it, and Andy can still be a part of it. But maybe it's like Angeline and Mary interviewing this person. Cool. And at the end of the day, it's like we just want to have great conversations and let people talk about what they're doing and how they got there. So
they have like not better, but new, different perspectives, right? And like, and people might be sick of hearing us talk all the time. But and also like I'm not saying this just to say it, but I think they're both much smarter than I am.
100%.
Like, maybe Tom too, but yeah, it's just it feels better. I know you said you listened to the second season's recap, and they were part of that.
Yes.
And they have great voices, and we want them to be heard, and I think that they'd be such a tremendous addition to the team. So that's I actually think this is like a 100% better direction that we're going
new and
in.
Improved.
Yeah.
So we're incredibly excited to get it going again, and can't wait to share it with everybody.
Breaking news, heard it here first. This is huge, though. I mean, I think a lot of people will be really confused. Like, what?
Yeah.
What happened?
Right.
You had a really great thing going, and I can also see that you're going to create another incredible new thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so can you just give us I'm just curious, as someone who's just launched their own podcast, how will thank you. How will In Process be different from, I mean, you just mentioned one difference, which is hosts and different voices. I think hosting is such a great idea. I love to hear that, especially if it's different genders, different perspectives, different lens. But I'm curious, how else will it be different?
So I think that one of the things that we struggled with on the Kimchi Kids podcast was there was like a constant kind of like dark cloud about money throughout the whole, like, I would say like second season. Like it was just constantly coming back to like, what about money? What about money? And it was just like, but I think like with the kind of weight of the pressure taken off, because I think the 4 of us with our kind of like renewed spirit and vigor behind what we're going to do. I just feel like the whole kind of like process is just going to feel a lot more fun again. There was definitely a moment where like if anyone out there listening has like done, this process of shooting, recording, editing, releasing, it's a lot. So much work. I think when we first got into it, we had no idea how, and believe me, like when I watch things now, I'm just like, I see certain cuts and edits. I'm just like, whew, like that's good. Like, and that's not easy. And, I see 2 cameras and I'm just like, good luck. Like, I'm like, this is hard. Like there's just so much work and pressure. And I think that for a moment during that, it felt like just so much pressure.
It almost takes the fun out of it.
It did. It definitely did.
Right.
But I think like I'm incredibly stoked and excited to do this in a way that it's going to be like the conversations were always incredible, right? Like, don't get me wrong. Like,
Absolutely.
I felt like every time we got up and we wrapped up a show, we're just like, I just felt like deeply connected to the person that we were talking with. And I felt like I learned so much.
Same.
And I'm still going to get all of that. But I feel like as a team, it just feels different when you're like walking together and everyone's step by step taking, the journey forward, as a unit. And I feel like that's one thing I'm really excited about. So.
Yeah.
Anything to add?
I mean, yeah, I'm just excited to see the new format. I think also like, I don't know why they were really against us like having just an episode of us, just shooting the shit. And I think we're gonna have more of that.
That's great.
Yeah, and it's like what we have things to say, and
yeah, you do.
It's not, it's not always just about, what was your journey and how did you get here and blah, blah, blah. Even though obviously those are fascinating and people want to hear those stories, but we also want to discuss did you see Squid Game? Just like things that aren't so serious, right?
So relatable.
Yeah, and I'm excited to kind of go pivot into that direction. And this is just, I feel like being in the industry, we've learned or gained so much resilience, and I think that's why for us, anytime things collapse like this, for us it's like, all right, let's just sweep it up and move forward. Let's just like find a way to keep going. And I think the pandemic was a big like, I don't know how many times we had to pivot during that time, and each time it was difficult. Each time it was heartbreaking and heart-wrenching and frustrating and like, God damn it, again? Like, make up your damn mind, Fauci. Like, what are you doing? And it's so, it was just, there was just so much of that. And like, I think just being in the industry, going through the pandemic, all the experiences we've had, having this breakup, like, it's just like, it's part of the game, and if you're not willing to put up with the ups and downs, then get the fuck out, right? But for now, it's like we want to continue to just I don't know, that was harsh. But I know what you're trying.
I know what you're saying though, because it is not possible to only have one.
Right.
It's not just always rainbows and sunshine.
Right.
Ever
it
in
doesn't
life.
Always work out.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you saying like, it is difficult. It does hurt. It is heartbreaking. It is heart-wrenching. It is frustrating. Like, cause it fucking is. And when something ends, it also hurts.
Right.
Yeah.
There's grief.
For sure.
Yeah.
Even when you have something exciting to look forward to,
Right.
there's still grief.
Right.
And grief isn't just for when someone dies.
Yeah.
Right. Grief is any time that there's significant changes in life.
Right.
You can have grief. We can have grief over the pandemic. We can have grief over a job we used to have, a breakup. Like, there's so many different forms of grief. And I just thank you for sharing. That's hard. What something ended. And yes, we're so excited for this new beginning.
Right.
And also we can hold space.
Right.
For the fact that something happened that was hard, that hurt, or that is frustrating, and that there's a lot of change to adjust, pivoting that happens. It can be awkward.
Yeah.
No, for sure.
So it's interesting because one of my episodes, the first intro episode, I talked about something called FFT. And this kind of is the perfect segue into that. So first fucking time is what FFT stands for. Yes. So Dr. Renee Brown, therapist, social worker, researcher, incredible best-selling author, incredible TED Talk. One of the most popular TED Talks is her TED Talk on shame. And vulnerability. If you've never watched it, I highly recommend. So she is who I learned this term from. And when she launched her first podcast, she talked about her FFT, this being an FFT for her. And first fucking time is when you have these scary, vulnerable, awkward, you haven't nailed it yet. You're not a pro at it yet.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, when was it sounds like you're about to embark on an FFT with this podcast in process, but I'm curious if you have a story or if you want to share an experience with FFT.
You got an FFT?
I mean, I think just dealing with the whole, you know, panini is what my favorite term now to use for the pandemic. Shout out to Jennifer Kim for that.
The whole panini.
But you know, there was definitely a lot of FFTs during that moment, and I felt like, you know, just it was like I felt like for the longest time in my career, right, we're built with this idea of this shield, right, this shield of resilience, where something happens and you're just like, no worries, I know how to fix that. You know, that's been my job title, right? Like for over a decade is just fixing things, right? So, but with the pandemic, I felt like for the first time there was no playbook, right? Thank you. Like there was nothing to tell you, hey, this is how it's going to work out, and it'll be okay if you follow these steps, right? Like all our lives we've been following recipes for like to succeed, and for the first time we didn't have that in front of us, and I felt like, you know, it was one of those moments in life where you're just kind of like accepting the fact that like we're all in a vulnerable state. We don't know what the answer is going to be, to just kind of be able to just look at our business partner and Andy and just be like, I don't know, you know, like I don't know what is going to change this, but all we can do is try. And that was kind of like the roadmap for us was like, we don't know,
let's see what happens,
but let's give this a try, you know, and that's all you can do, right? And I think through that, it was like a constant, hey, let's try this, let's try that, let's, you know, this isn't working. And but I feel like it was for the first time in my career where I felt like it's okay to just like look at one another, you know, your peers and the people that are depending on you, and just be like, hey guys, like I don't know if this is going to be the solution, but I think that it's worth giving it a shot, and being okay to be like vulnerable in front of them. So
yeah.
It's role modeling.
Right.
For sure. I think for me, a good first fucking time was when my brother and I, we opened our first restaurant. It was called City Rock, which translates to Toshirak in Korean, and it means like a packed lunch. Super clever. But my brother Billy's responsible for that name. But
I love
I remember like setting up for it and like signing the lease, and, you know, just saving all this money and asking people for money, and like we're getting close to kind of opening day, and I remember like there were just like 3 items or like things that happened that were all like soul crushing. It's like something with the state happened, or the city happened, and then something with our gas lines happened, and then I was just like, I felt this insane, just overwhelming feeling like, what am I doing? What have I gotten myself into? I don't know how to do any of this. You know, like I went from, you know, being a sous chef for Swift and Sons in Chris Pendam and Cold Surgeon, and, you know, thinking I knew what I was getting myself into, and, you know, Thomas was there every step of the way, just helping us with a lot of the administration and front of house stuff. But yeah, it was just like, man, I'm going to fail, and I brought my brother into this. Like, this is not good. But you know, we got to opening day, we got through all the issues, and I realized, you know, it was a big lesson. It's like, you just got to not give up. You know, you just got to attack things one thing at a time, and eventually they will, or they might not work out. But either way, it's like he's saying, like, we don't know what the results are going to be, but if you don't have the courage to just step forward and try things, like, you'll never accomplish anything. So yeah, that was, I guess, the first fucking time that I really just realized I was in over my head. And but the result of it was, you know, well, we closed the restaurant eventually, but that was due to the pandemic. But through opening that, I met our partner Alvin, who brought me on to open Perilla, and through Perilla, Thomas and I became partners, and then that was 2018, and since then it's just been like a roller coaster, but an upwards roller coaster, you know. And I think we've made a lot of progress, and we've learned a tremendous amount, and we've learned that we don't know shit about shit, you know. And
Thank you.
Yeah, and that's kind of where we are.
Thank you for saying that. I always have to remind myself of that, and I tell my daughters this all the time. Nobody actually knows what the fuck they're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Honestly,
Right, for sure.
we all are really good at pretending like we know what the fuck we're doing.
Right.
And of course we know like some things, you know, you have a skill, you have a trade, you have a craft. Of course, you know how to do that one thing, but in general in life, no one has a guidebook. And with business, there's lots of failure. That's natural in any career. The most successful people in the world have dozens of failure stories.
Right.
They really do. I do, you do, we all do. And I think a lot of it is by taking the risks of having an experience like a first fucking time, knowing, you know, even this is vulnerable to start a podcast for the first time without having had the experience before. I've been a guest on a podcast, but I've never hosted a podcast, and having, you know, the privilege of being able to hire a production team that knows what they're doing. But it's still vulnerable.
Yeah.
It's still vulnerable because you don't know even how this is all going to land with the hospitality community, with our audience, with, you know, listeners. And I really respect what you're saying about, you know, you tried something. That's brave. That's courageous. Even if it maybe didn't end up in the result that you had aspired. Same with me. I've had tons of failures. I've had to close businesses. I've had partnerships break up. I've had divorce. You know, I've had to start over after losing everything in life. And all of these experiences, as horrendous as they were, they're messy as fuck and they hurt deep.
Right.
Even with all of that, I would never take any of it back.
I love that.
I have zero regret over my failures. I don't know about you. It sounds like, I mean, that led to this. So
It's and it's funny because our business partner reminds us all the time. He's like,
Really?
"You guys happy you did this? You guys are," you know, like, "Yes, Alvin, thank you." But yeah, I'm ecstatic. You know, I'm grateful every day that I get to walk into our restaurant. You know, and we have more coming. You know, and it's just like, it was a dream at one point, right? And now we're living it.
Right?
Yeah. So it's
this podcast was a dream for me too. And now I'm living it. So I think it's important to share these stories because I think that it, like, you can eventually work your way up to things that you dream about.
100%.
And I think part of that, and listen, does they always work out? No. There's lots of dreams I may never fulfill, but along the way, I think we have to, as a community, as an industry, and even just as people, we have to start to learn to be more vulnerable and be more comfortable with vulnerability as a strength versus, you know, I was raised being taught that vulnerability is a weakness.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so that's why I love these conversations. And thank you so much for sharing so much and being vulnerable with me, because it's normalizing the importance of vulnerability versus seeing it as a negative thing or a weak thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
I feel like we talk with a lot of our younger kids, and I hope that message continues to get shared with the next generation, because I feel like we're already in a weird time. And I feel like for the youth out there, there's just constant concern and worry about, what am I going to do to be happy, quote unquote happy, and quote unquote successful. And I think that, you know, with them being able to hear from people that have, you know, succeeded in their eyes, to know that there's so many failures along the way. I think that message needs to just get shared over and over, because I'm seeing it firsthand with some of the younger kids that work for us, or, you know, that we know. And there's just this unnecessary pressure that, like, they have to have it figured out by 25. And I'm like, you are so young. You have so much time to fail and learn and grow. And eventually find what it is to succeed. But it's a process, it's a journey, and embrace it, and I just feel like, that if we could pass one thing on, that's the one thing I want to constantly share with the next generation. So
yes.
Yeah.
I follow, I don't know if you've ever heard of Ray Dalio.
yeah, absolutely. Principles.
So, right? Yeah. Principles. And one of his principles that has really landed with me is pain plus reflection equals progress.
I love that.
Yes.
It's true though. If you, and so these conversations again, maybe seem like, well, okay, but why do I want to dwell on things that hurt or that failed or that didn't work? And the reason is because you need to reflect on that pain. And with that reflection, that's how, listen, we're going to make other mistakes, but we probably won't make the same ones again. If you reflect and you let yourself feel the pain of whatever that experience is.
That's true. It hurts and it's hard, but you got to embrace it. That's the only way you grow, truly. So
listen, thank you both so much.
Of course.
You shared, you were vulnerable. We, listened and shared to stories that we've lived. And that's what this podcast is all about. So Thank you, Thomas. Yeah. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you for having us.
So much for having us.
So pumped for In Process.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you, Justin.
Shout out to Justin.
You can't see him, but he's leading our production. And so, I will come listen to our next future episodes of We Have Lived. Check out In Process when it's out. Awesome. And of course, Terms of Service as well.
Awesome.
Thank you.
It's a wrap.